I had just won $100 million in the Powerball lottery. The moment I saw the matching numbers on my phone screen, I couldn't breathe. My hands started shaking, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my chest might burst. Not because I was greedy for money, but because there was only one thought in my mind. We were saved. I picked up my 3-year-old son, Miles, held him tightly against my chest, and almost ran out of the house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't wait. I just wanted to see Julian's face, my husband's, when he heard the news. We were finally free from debt. He wouldn't have to come home scowling every night anymore. Miles would have a real childhood, and our little family would finally be happy. The car stopped in front of the office building where Julian's company was located, right in the heart of Los Angeles. I carried Miles down the hallway, my heart racing with excitement. His office door was slightly ajar. I was just about to knock when a sound shattered my entire world. A familiar female voice was moaning, and right after that, Julian's voice, the man I had trusted completely for years, whispering intimate words to another woman. I froze outside the door. My hands trembled as I clutched Miles tightly, so afraid that if I loosened my grip even a little, he would start crying. Inside my coat pocket, the $100 million lottery ticket suddenly felt burning hot, like a red-hot coal searing my skin. Then I heard that sentence. The sentence that killed everything I had ever believed was family. "Don't worry, baby. I've already taken care of that country bumpkin. A fake debt of $75,000, plus a report showing the company on the verge of bankruptcy. She'll panic, sign the divorce papers, and leave without a single cent. As for the kid, Miles, let him stay with his mom for now. If I want him later, I'll take him back." My heart shattered into pieces. In that instant, I understood that the man I had loved for years had never really existed. Standing behind that door was no longer Julian, my husband, my child's father, but a stranger, cold and terrifyingly cruel. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. A cold, silent smile, so still that even I didn't realize I had done it. A smile that Julian would later pay a very high price to understand. Because in that moment, I suddenly realized something. Fate didn't give me $100 million to share with a traitor. It gave me that money to bury him. My name is Kendra Wallace, and this is the story of how a woman once called a country bumpkin became the worst nightmare of her enemy's life. But that moment was only the beginning. Because what Julian didn't know was this: I heard everything, and I didn't miss a single detail. In the next part, you'll see how I began my game, and why the first person I sought out was the very man Julian had once destroyed. If someone asked me what my life was like before that day, I would answer honestly, painfully ordinary. My husband, Julian Wallace, was the director of Wallace Commercial Builds, a commercial construction company based in Los Angeles. He was my first love, and the only man I had ever loved. We had been married for 5 years and had a 3-year-old son named Miles, the sunshine of my life. After Miles was born, I quit my job to stay home full-time. I became the household manager, the cook, the cleaner, the one who organized every little detail to keep our home tidy and warm. I built that little nest with everything I had. Julian handled the finances. He left early every morning and often came home very late. Even on weekends, his phone never stopped ringing. Clients, contracts, unfinished projects. I felt sorry for how hard he worked. I never complained. I kept telling myself, I need to be his solid support. Sometimes Julian was irritable from work pressure. Some nights he came home exhausted, his tone sharp and impatient. I stayed silent and let it go. I believed every marriage had its ups and downs. As long as two people still loved each other and cared about their family, everything would be fine. We had almost no savings. Julian said the company was still young. All profits had to be reinvested to maintain cash flow and expand. I trusted him completely. I never asked more questions. I never doubted him. Because at the time, I thought I was living in a happy family. Looking back now, I understand one thing. Not everyone who stays silent is strong. Sometimes silence is simply misplaced trust, and that trust is exactly what makes betrayal so easy. But back then, I had no idea that the paradise I lived in was just a hollow shell. That day was a Tuesday. The Los Angeles sunlight streamed gently through the windows of our small home in South LA. There was no sign that my life was about to take a completely different turn. As usual, after feeding Miles breakfast, I started cleaning the house. Miles sat in the living room, focused on his favorite Lego set, occasionally looking up at me and smiling. While wiping the table, I noticed a Powerball ticket stuck under my grocery note. I had bought it yesterday at Ralph's. It was pouring rain. I rushed into a small neighborhood liquor store to get out of the rain. The elderly woman selling lottery tickets looked so pitiful. She smiled kindly and urged me to buy one for good luck. I had never believed in luck like this, but at that moment, I felt sorry for her. So I bought one, quick pick, and casually wrote down a few numbers tied to my family, my birthday, Julian's birthday, Miles's birthday, and our wedding date. Looking at the ticket now, I laughed. It was obviously worthless. But as if something nudged me, I pulled out my phone and went to the official California Lottery website, just to check for fun. The numbers from last night's draw appeared. I began mumbling each number. 5, 12, 23. My heart stopped. My ticket also had 5, 12, 23. My hands started shaking. I kept checking. 34, 45, and Powerball. 7. Dear God. I had matched all 5 main numbers and the Powerball. $100 million. 100 million. I tried to count the zeros in my head, but my brain went completely numb. My hands shook so badly that I dropped my phone onto the floor. I collapsed onto the cold tile, my head spinning. I had just won the lottery. The first feeling wasn't joy. It was shock, so intense it made me nauseous. I took a deep breath. Then, from deep in my chest, a violent wave of excitement surged up. I started crying, sobbing uncontrollably. Dear God, this can't be real. I was rich. My son would have a brilliant future. I would buy him a beautiful home, send him to the best schools. And Julian, my husband, wouldn't have to work himself to exhaustion anymore. The company burden, the debts, everything would be solved. He wouldn't come home scowling every night. We would be happy. I imagined Julian's face when he heard the news. He would hug me tightly, overwhelmed with joy. My love for him, the years I sacrificed at home, could finally help him achieve his big dream. I couldn't wait another second. I had to tell him immediately. I grabbed my handbag, carefully placed the lottery ticket into the zipped inner pocket, and picked up Miles. He looked at me with confusion. Miles, sweetheart, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. We're going to see Daddy. Mommy has wonderful news for him. Miles giggled and wrapped his arms around my neck. I rushed out of the house and called an Uber. The entire ride, my heart pounded non-stop. I felt like the whole world was smiling at me. I, a regular stay-at-home mom, was now the owner of $100 million. My life, my family's life, a new chapter, bright and glorious, was beginning right then. I squeezed Miles's tiny hand and whispered, Miles, our lives have changed. But I had no idea that hopeful trip would lead me straight into the cruelest moment of my life. And in the next part, you'll understand why the greatest joy of my life turned into a horror I could never erase. The car stopped in front of a small office building in downtown Los Angeles, where Wallace Commercial Builds was headquartered. It was Julian's dream, and once, my pride. I had run around with him completing the early paperwork. I had stayed up late, sitting at a cold dining table, helping him calculate his first contracts when the company was still unknown. Holding Miles, my heart racing with excitement, I entered the lobby. The receptionist, a young woman familiar with me, smiled warmly. Hi, Mrs. Kendra. You're here to see Mr. Wallace? I nodded, trying to stay calm but unable to hide my excitement. Yes, I have wonderful news for him. Is he in his office? Does he have a guest?" She hesitated slightly. "Well, it seems like he does, but I didn't see anyone go in. Would you like me to let him know?" I shook my head immediately. "No need. You keep working. I want to surprise him." I didn't want anyone intruding on this special moment, the moment I believed would change my family's life. I tiptoed down the hallway toward the director's office. The closer I got, the faster my heart raced. There was only one thought in my mind. I was about to see the man of my life. The office door was slightly open. Just as I raised my hand to knock, a sound came from inside that froze my blood. Giggling, coy, sweet in a painfully naked way. "Oh, did you really mean that, baby?" That voice was terrifyingly familiar. I stopped dead. A cold sense of dread crawled up my spine. Miles shifted in my arms. Instinctively, I covered his mouth and motioned for silence. Then I heard Julian's voice, the voice I heard every day and night. But now it was soft, seductive, and horrifyingly unfamiliar. "Why are you in such a hurry, babe? Let me deal with that country bumpkin at home first. Once it's done, I'll file for divorce immediately." My heart shattered. Country bumpkin. He was talking about me. Divorce. I stepped back, my whole body trembling, and pressed myself into a shadowed corner. Miles sensed my tension and didn't cry. He simply buried his face into my chest. The woman's voice spoke again. This time, I recognized it instantly. Allison, the woman Julian had introduced as my sister's friend, someone who occasionally came over for dinner. Young, beautiful, smooth-talking. I had even liked her. "And what about your plan?" Allison asked. "I heard your wife has some savings?" Julian laughed, a scornful laugh I had never heard from him before. "What does she know about life? She stays home all day. She believes everything I say." He lowered his voice smugly. I checked. She said she spent all the savings on life insurance for Miles. Perfect. She cut off her own escape route. Then came sounds I couldn't mistake. Clothes rustling, loud kisses, lewd noises and soft moans. No matter how innocent I was, I knew exactly what they meant. I stood frozen. Inside my pocket, the $100 million lottery ticket burned, like a red-hot coal pressed against my skin. Dear God, the joy from minutes earlier vanished completely. What remained was a bitter, nauseating truth. My husband, the man I trusted blindly, was cheating on me in his own office. And it wasn't just betrayal. They had a plan to eliminate me. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, choking back the sobs stuck in my throat. I couldn't believe it. The man I shared a bed with, the father of my child, calling me a country bumpkin, a leech. Tears streamed down my face, hot and burning. Miles looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes and reached out his tiny hand to wipe my tears. My heart felt pierced straight through. What should I do? Burst in? Scream? Destroy everything? But then, an eerie calm descended. If I rushed in now, what would I gain? Just a hysterical, betrayed woman, and possibly lose my son. I took a deep breath. No, I had to keep listening. There are moments in life when you must choose between madness and a terrifying clarity. I chose clarity. Inside the office, Allison spoke after a pause. "Julian, about the fake $75,000 company debt. Are you sure it's safe?" "I'm worried." Julian replied confidently. "Don't worry, babe. The head accountant is reliable. Fake books, loss reports, massive debt, everything's ready." He continued slowly, like a lecture. "In court, I'll say the company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Kendra knows nothing about finances. She'll panic, sign the divorce papers immediately, leave with nothing, and be labeled as the wife who abandoned her husband in hard times." The floor seemed to collapse beneath my feet. So cruel, so evil. "After we're married and the company stabilizes," Julian continued, "if I want the kid, I'll take him back. That sentence struck my heart like a hammer. Even Miles, his own son, was just an object to discard and retrieve later. My tears stopped. A freezing chill ran down my spine. The man in that room was no longer the Julian I loved. He was a monster. I looked down at Miles, half asleep on my shoulder. My son, I'm sorry I was so naive, but I swear, no one will take you from me. No one will hurt us. I held him tighter. In that moment, the $100 million lottery ticket was no longer a lucky gift. It became a weapon, a lifeline for me and my son, and a tool for revenge. I turned and left that hallway, silent as a shadow. I couldn't let them notice me. I had to leave immediately. The receptionist looked surprised. "Mrs. Kendra, you're leaving? You didn't see Mr. Wallace?" I forced a shaky smile. "Oh, I forgot my wallet at home. Please don't tell Julian I was here. I want to come back tomorrow and surprise him." Yes." She looked confused but didn't ask more. I hurried outside and called another Uber. The moment I sat in the back seat, clutching Miles, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I cried. I cried for my stupidity, for a love that had died, for the cruelty of the man I once called my entire world. The car pulled away. It carried away a woman who had just died and gave birth to another, rising from the ashes of betrayal. He had a plan involving a fake $75,000 debt, and I had $100 million. Julian, you chose this path. Now we play. And I promise, I will play until the very end. The car stopped on our familiar small street in South LA. I struggled to carry Miles out of the car. My whole body trembled, not from exhaustion, but because the shock was still reverberating through every fiber of me. I paid the driver with hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the money onto the ground. I stepped into the house, staggering, like someone who had just walked through a storm and still hadn't caught her breath. Luckily, Miles was fast asleep on my shoulder. He didn't have to witness his mother's pathetic face right now. I gently laid him on the bed, took off his shoes, pulled Note the blanket carefully. I stood still for a moment, staring at that angelic face. Long lashes, steady breathing, tiny hands curled as if they were still clutching my collar. And then, the thing I'd been forcing down ever since I left that building, exploded. I ran straight into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned the faucet on full blast, as if the sound of running water could drown out everything. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, clutching my chest, and I cried. I cried like I had never cried in my life. The tears were scorching and bitter. I cried for my fate. I cried for 5 years of marriage that in the end turned out to be nothing but a play, staged too perfectly. The man I called my husband, the man I trusted completely, the man that just a few hours earlier I had been ready to hand my entire fortune to, was in bed with another woman. Not only had he betrayed me, he had called me a country bumpkin, a parasite, and he had planned to shove me out the door with nothing. Worse than that, with a fake debt of $75,000, a number that even if I worked like a slave for my whole life, I could never repay. He didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to destroy me. He wanted to make sure I could never get back up again. Why? What did I do wrong? I stayed home to take care of our child. I cooked, I did laundry, I cleaned, I kept the house spotless. I saved every dollar. I didn't buy new lipstick. I didn't buy pretty clothes. Everything I thought about was Julian, was Miles, was the company Julian said was struggling. And all those sacrifices, in his eyes, were just the sacrifices of a parasite. Then I suddenly remembered the $100 million lottery ticket still in my pocket, and his plan about the $75,000 debt. How ironic. Never in my life had I seen myself look so ridiculous. I wondered, if today I hadn't won the lottery, if today I hadn't randomly decided to carry Miles to the office, what would have happened? Maybe in just a few more weeks I would have received divorce papers. I would have gone numb when I saw the $75,000 debt. I would have panicked. I would have dropped to my knees and begged. I would have believed I had ruined my husband's life. And in the end, I would have left in humiliation, with nothing, no future, and even my son. The more I thought about it, the more my tears began to dry. Not because the pain was gone, but because something else began to rise up, hot as fire. No, not just anger, hatred. A hatred that sank all the way into the bone. My love for Julian died the moment I heard him talk about our son like he was talking about an object. Let him stay with his mom for now. If I want him later, I'll take him back. A father who can talk about his child like that isn't human. He's an animal. And I had lived next to that animal for 5 years without knowing. I was so stupid. I looked up at myself in the mirror, a woman with tangled hair, puffy eyes, pale skin, a face like someone had sucked all the life out of it. Country bumpkin. Yes, maybe I was a country bumpkin. I was naive for believing in first love, believing in vows of faithfulness. But from this moment on, that country bumpkin was dead. I had to live for Miles. Miles was my life. There was no way I would let a demon like Julian lay a hand on my son. He wanted me to leave with nothing? I would teach him what it feels like to have nothing left. He wanted to play with fake books? I would play a much bigger game. I took a deep breath and wiped my tears dry. The icy tile under my feet gave me a strange calm. The calm of someone who has hit rock bottom and knows. There is only one direction left to go. Up. I had to make a plan. If you're listening up to this point, ask yourself just one question. If it were you, what would you do? Would you scream, smash things, storm in and expose them immediately? Or would you stay silent and turn your pain into the thing that makes the betrayer pay the most expensive price of his life? Because right then, I understood. Revenge doesn't need noise. Revenge needs calm. This $100 million lottery ticket was a life or death secret. No one could know, not even my parents. At least not yet. It was my ultimate weapon. I had to claim this prize in the safest, most secret way possible. And I couldn't do it under my own name. If I claimed it myself, during the divorce, Julian would find out, and he would have plenty of ways to demand half or find a way to steal it all. Whether I took the money before or after the divorce, a man like him would never let go. I needed someone I could place my life in, and before I did anything, I had to keep acting. I had to keep playing the naive wife who knew nothing. I had to let Julian and that low-class mistress keep their play running smoothly, so they'd feel confident, so they'd slip up. I had to gather evidence of the affair, evidence that Julian kept 2 sets of books, evidence that he was evading taxes, moving assets, and preparing to fabricate the $75,000 debt to kill me on paper. He wanted to push me to my death with a fake debt? I would push him into real prison with the real crimes he had committed. I stood up and washed my face with cold water. The cold water snapped me fully awake. The pain was still there, like a knife buried deep in my heart. But reason had taken control. I was no longer the Kendra from a few hours ago. Now I was a mother who had to protect her child, a betrayed woman, preparing to strike back. Julian, you started this war. Now let's see what this country bumpkin will do to you and your slut. I opened the bathroom door and stepped out. My eyes had gone cold, my face still marked with tears, but inside me there was only one thing left: determination. The first mission, the most urgent one, was dealing with the lottery ticket. The claim deadline was 90 days. I couldn't wait, but I also couldn't go myself. If a massive amount of money suddenly appeared in my account, Julian would notice immediately. He was my husband. Even if he didn't care about me, a financial change like that couldn't go unnoticed. And more than that, he was already investigating my finances to prepare for divorce. If I made one wrong move, he would smell it. I needed someone I trusted absolutely, someone who would never betray me, someone who could keep this secret to the grave. I thought of my parents. My father was honest and simple, but because he was too honest, sometimes he talked too much. If he knew his daughter had won $100 million, he might accidentally brag to the neighbors in his excitement, or worse, become easy for Julian to manipulate if Julian came back to our hometown pretending to be the pitiful son-in-law. That left only my mother. My mother was a woman who had worked hard her entire life. She had little education, but she was careful, discreet, and she loved me unconditionally. She would never do anything that could harm her child. I stood still for a moment, as if I had just fit the final piece into a life-or-death puzzle. Yes, only my mother could help me. I waited until night. Julian came home like he always did, scowling, tossing his briefcase onto the sofa the moment he walked in, loosening his tie while muttering as if the entire world owed him an apology. "Work was terrible today. Is dinner ready?" "It's ready," I answered softly, forcing myself to look tired. "I set everything up. Go shower and come eat." He glanced at me. Just one glance, but it was enough to make my heart miss a beat. Maybe he noticed my eyes were a little swollen. "What's wrong? Did you cry?" In my mind, the image flashed again, outside the office door, the giggling, the obscene breathing, and his words cold as a blade. But I had prepared my answer. I couldn't afford a mistake. "I think I got sick this afternoon," I said, my voice hoarse like I'd been awake all night. "I feel really unwell. Do you think I could take Miles back home to stay with my mom for a few days? I need fresh air, and I miss my mom's cooking." That wasn't just asking permission. It was a test. If he stopped me, it meant he wanted to monitor me. If he agreed, it meant he still believed I was trapped in his palm, and my absence for a few days would give him more freedom to see his mistress. Julian frowned for 1 second. Then he nodded casually. "Yeah, maybe. Go rest for a few days and get better. I've been too busy. I haven't had time to take you two out." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a few bills, about $100, and held them out to me. "Here, use this." I took it, my hand trembling slightly, lowering my face to hide the contempt that was about to erupt in my eyes. $100. The woman who had just won $100 million, was standing here taking his hand out like a freeloader, humiliating. But I reminded myself, every word like a nail hammered into my heart, "Endure it, Kendra. Endure a little longer." The next morning, I packed for myself and Miles. I deliberately brought only my oldest clothes. I didn't call a taxi. I took a Greyhound bus back home. My hometown was in a small rural community in Northern California, about a 6-hour ride from Los Angeles. On the bus, Miles lay in my arms, his breath warm with the scent of milk. I looked out the window at the highway stretching like a thread, pulling me away from that city, the city that had buried my marriage alive. I wasn't going home to rest. I was going home to take the first step of my plan. The moment my mother saw me and her grandson, she lit up like she was welcoming sunlight. "My girl, why didn't you call first? Where's Julian? Why didn't he bring you home?" "I've been feeling a little sick, so I came to stay with you for a few days," I replied, forcing my voice to sound normal. My mother took my bag, fussing over me with the same loving scolding as always. But inside me, it was all just distant buzzing. I was counting every minute, waiting for the moment I could speak the truth. I waited until night. My father went next door to eat fried fish. Miles was fast asleep. The small kitchen was left with only the two of us, a weak yellow light spreading over my mother's face. I stepped forward, then dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around my mother's legs like a child. This time, I wasn't acting anymore. I cried for real. "Mom, Julian betrayed me," I sobbed. "He has a mistress." My mother froze. The soup ladle in her hand slipped, hit the side of the pot with a cold metallic clang. "What?" she gasped. What are you saying? Julian is a good man." I shook my head, tears spilling without stopping. "He's not good, Mom. He's a demon." I choked, then kept going, each word tearing me apart. "He's cheating with Allison, the girl he said was his sister's friend. I caught them at the office, and they're not just cheating. They're planning to divorce me." I looked straight at my mother. They want to pin a fake $75,000 debt on me so I leave with nothing. And they're even planning to take Miles from me. My mother swayed and had to brace herself against the counter. Her face went pale. She knew me better than anyone. She knew I would never make up something like this. Then the fury of a mother erupted like flames. "Dear God, that bastard," my mother snarled. "A beast with a wife and child like you. I'm going to Los Angeles. I'll gouge that slut's eyes out, and I'll have a serious talk with your useless husband." "No, Mom!" I jumped up and grabbed her hand immediately. "If we cause a scene now, I'll lose everything. I could even lose Miles, Mom." I stared into my mother's eyes, my voice both firm and desperate, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff. "Mom, I'm begging you. Only you can save me and your grandson. There are secrets that, if you tell the wrong person, become a noose around your neck. But if you place them in the right hands, they become the key that opens the door to survival. And right there in that small kitchen, I knew. My mother was the only person in this world I could place my fate in. I reached into my pocket and pulled out something wrapped carefully in many layers of paper. The lottery ticket. I placed it into my mother's hand. "Mom, I won the Powerball." I swallowed hard. "I won $100 million. My mother's eyes widened. She looked at the ticket, then at me, as if I had just said something that didn't belong to real life. "Kendra," her voice trembled. "My girl, what are you saying?" She thought I was so shocked I was speaking nonsense. I burst into tears again, but this time the tears carried both fear and a thread of hope. "It's true, Mom. God didn't abandon me. I won $100 million, but I can't go claim it myself. If Julian finds out, he'll take it all." I squeezed my mother's hand. "You're the only person I trust. Can you claim this money for me? Claim it, and put it into your account." I spoke faster, like I was afraid that if I slowed down for even a second, the luck would disappear. "This is the money I need to start over, to fight for Miles, but you have to keep it secret. Don't tell Dad. Don't tell anyone. Can you do that?" My mother trembled as she held the ticket. She could barely read, but she understood what $100 million meant. She looked at me for a long time. Her expression shifted from shock to heartbreak, and then finally hardened into a cold, powerful determination that made me shiver. She nodded, decisive. "Yes, I'll do it," she said slowly, each word like an oath. "Don't worry. This is only between you, me, and God. I won't let anyone steal a single cent from you. I'll go claim the money. You just tell me what I need to do." I hugged my mother tightly. The two of us, two black women in that small kitchen, were sharing a secret so huge it could change the entire fate of our family. I began explaining every step in detail. My mother had to call the California Lottery headquarters and schedule an appointment for the paperwork. She had to bring identification. When she got there, she could request to remain anonymous. She just had to say she wanted to receive the money via bank transfer. I had already prepared a new prepaid phone, and the next morning, I would take my mother to open a new bank account at a credit union, one Julian would never suspect. The money, about $60 million after federal and state taxes, would sit safely in that account, waiting for the day I needed it. After 3 days back home, after giving my mother the most important mission, I took Miles back to Los Angeles. My mother went to the lottery headquarters. She wore a mask and disguised herself discreetly. Everything went smoothly. And then, the money was in my mother's account. I let out a breath. The weapon was loaded. It was time to return to the battlefield. I deliberately came home late, right when Julian had already returned from work. I needed him to see me as a wife who had just recovered and come back, tired, weak, clinging to her husband like her last lifeline. The moment I opened the door, I saw Julian slumped on the sofa, eyes fixed on ESPN. He didn't stand up, didn't pick up our child. He just asked flatly, "Back? Feel better?" I carried Miles, walking slowly as if I might collapse. "I feel better. Miles misses home, so he's been restless. He couldn't sleep. I set our son down. Miles ran over and lifted his arms to be picked up. Julian lifted him reluctantly, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek like he was checking off a task, then set him down right away. "Go play somewhere else. Dad's watching TV." My heart tightened, but I swallowed it. I couldn't show it. Not now. I pulled the suitcase into the bedroom. Julian followed and shut the door. For a split second, my body tensed as if I was trapped. But he just crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, his face serious like he was about to deliver bad news. Here it comes, I thought. He's starting. "Kendra," he said, "sit down. We need to talk." I immediately went into character. "What is it, honey? Is the company having problems?" Julian let out a deep sigh, the kind of sigh I'd seen him practice many times. "It's really bad, babe. Our biggest client canceled the contract. A shipment got stuck at customs. I can't move money around. I'm about to go bankrupt." I covered my mouth, eyes widening in the exact way of a woman who knows nothing. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Julian watched me carefully. "I've borrowed everywhere I can. Now there's only the bank, but they want collateral, and the house still has a loan." He paused, then softened his voice with fake tenderness. "I've heard life insurance for kids is very good. It protects the child and builds savings for college. But I remember, you had some savings. What about that money now?" I looked up, tears welling in my eyes. "Honey," I sobbed, "I was going to tell you when you were happier. I didn't know it was this bad." I swallowed and delivered the line he most wanted to hear. I have nothing left. I spent it all." "What?" Julian jumped up, grabbed my shoulders, and shook me hard. "What did you spend it on? That was thousands of dollars. I told you to save it for emergencies." My shoulders hurt, but my heart hurt more. I cried, stammering like it was real. "For Miles, honey. He was sick. I felt so sorry for him." I sniffled. "Did I do wrong? I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure our son had a future." And exactly as I predicted, in a very brief moment, Julian's eyes flashed with relief. Almost happiness. He believed it. He believed I had just cut off my last escape route, because once money went into insurance, it was almost impossible to pull out easily to split in a divorce. Everything was going according to his filthy plan. Julian let go of me and rubbed his temples like he was carrying the weight of the world. "God, what have you done? That money was supposed to save the company. Why didn't you ask me first?" He paced back and forth. "Now we're finished. The money's gone, and the company's almost bankrupt." I continued in character, choking back tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Should I go back home and borrow money from my parents? Maybe?" "Stop it!" Julian cut me off immediately. "Your parents live in the countryside. How much could they possibly have? Even if they sold all their land, it wouldn't be enough. It's over. There's no way." He sat down on the bed, perfectly defeated. "You only know how to stay home. You don't understand how cruel the outside world is." He waved a hand. "Let me handle it." Then he grabbed his jacket. "I'm going out to get some air. Being home is stressing me out." The door slammed. I heard the engine start. I knew exactly where he was going, to meet Allison, to share the good news, to celebrate that he had fooled me successfully. When the sound of the car disappeared, I stopped crying. I wiped my tears slowly, and a cold smile crept onto my lips. "Julian, you're a great actor, but you have no idea I've just discovered my own acting talent, too. You think you've cornered me? No. You just stepped into the trap I set. There is a moment in life when you stop asking, 'Why is this happening to me?' and start asking, 'What am I going to do to the one who caused it?'" From the second Julian walked out the door to get some air, I understood. I was no longer a wife waiting to be loved. I was a woman counting down, and every day that passed was one day closer to the price he would pay. In the days that followed, I deliberately turned the house into a funeral. Simple meals, cut spending, old clothes, guilty posture. I looked at Julian with a mix of pity and self-blame, exactly what he liked. Then one night, after Miles was asleep, I brought him a cup of warm water and spoke softly like I was about to cry. "Honey, I can't stand seeing you like this. Is there anything I can do? Can I work at the company? Even if it's just cleaning, I want to share the burden with you." Julian looked surprised, but I knew he would agree. Having me at the company was a way to control me, and he wanted me to witness the company on the verge of bankruptcy with my own eyes, so I would sign the divorce without hesitation. After a moment, he clicked his tongue. "Fine, but the office isn't home. You do what I say, no complaining. And don't bring up family stuff, kids, any of that at work. Understand?" I nodded repeatedly, like I'd been granted a favor. "What about Miles?" he asked. "I'll take him to a private daycare near the company. I'll pick him up in the afternoon. I can arrange it." Julian nodded, looking me up and down. "Start Monday. And don't dress sloppy and embarrass people." He went into the room. I wiped the corner of my eye, but those weren't tears of humiliation. They were the tears of my first successful step. "Julian, you're the one who opened the cage door for me. You think I'm a sheep, but you don't know I'm walking in to expose the wolf in sheep's clothing. You." On Monday, I took Miles to a daycare 2 blocks from the company. He cried and clung to me, and my heart felt like it was breaking. "Miles, be good. Wait for me. Mommy is going to work, and I'll come back to pick you up. I promise. I'll give you the best life." I wore my oldest outfit, a yellowed white shirt, faded black pants, my hair in a neat bun, no makeup. I had to look like a true country bumpkin. When I walked into the company, the receptionist froze. I gave her a weak smile. "Hi. Starting today, I'm coming to work here. Mr. Wallace arranged a cleaning position for me." Her eyes shifted to sympathy. Clearly, Julian had told a moving story about a wife sacrificing to help her husband. Then the office door opened. Julian stepped out, and Allison was beside him. She wore a tight wine-red dress, wavy curls, flawless makeup, expensive perfume like a declaration. The two of them stood together like a successful power couple, and I stood in the corner of the office like a maid. Julian clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "This is Kendra, my wife. The company's struggling. Kendra offered to help. Coffee, photocopying, cleaning. If you need anything, ask her." I lowered my head. Please, help me out." Julian turned to Allison. "Allison, show Mrs. Jones the basics, okay? As for a seat, she can use the little desk in the storage corner." Allison smiled, the smile of someone who thought she had won. She held out her hand, nails painted bright red. "Hi, I'm Allison, the director's assistant. If you don't understand anything, just ask me." I shook her hand lightly. "Thank you. I'll try to do my best." From that point on, I became a real helper, arriving early to wipe desks, refill water, make coffee for everyone, and Julian and Allison were always the first two. Allison ordered me around. "My coffee has to be good espresso. I don't drink just anything." Then she tossed papers at me. "Photocopy these, 20 copies each. Hurry up. The director's meeting starts in 10 minutes. Julian was worse. He was cold in front of everyone, called Allison into his office, then slammed the door. Sometimes I brought water and heard laughter inside. I waited at the door. Once, Allison walked out with slightly swollen lips, her collar crooked, and she stared at me in challenge. I kept my head down and endured it, because every humiliation today would be the blade I returned later. I deliberately acted clumsy and slow so they would despise me even more. But I wasn't just cleaning. My eyes watched, my ears listened, and my mind recorded every detail. My target was the accounting department, where the manager Renee Porter worked, along with Mia and Dennis. Mrs. Porter was around 40, heavy-set, with a stern face, quiet, and the longest-tenured employee. At first I was afraid. If she was Julian's trusted person, I would have no chance. But I decided to approach her in the safest way, with sincerity and helplessness. Every morning I left an extra cup of herbal tea. "Mrs. Porter, I noticed you've been coughing. Drink this. It'll soothe your throat." She took it and nodded. "Thank you." At lunch, I stayed behind eating a simple packed meal, making sure I looked struggling. I gave her a jar of pickled okra my mother had sent. Her eyes softened. She sighed about the company. I immediately said through tears, "Mrs. Porter, is the company really that bad? I'm so scared. Julian comes home angry all the time. Sometimes he doesn't come home. If the company goes bankrupt, I don't know how my son and I will live." And I realized something important. Mrs. Porter was tense with the Julian-Allison duo. Allison constantly went in and out giving orders, speaking rudely. Mrs. Porter's face flushed with anger, but she still had to swallow it. When Allison left, she muttered, "Who does that girl think she is? Disrespectful." I understood then. She wasn't loyal in the obedient sense. She worked for a paycheck, and she despised the way Julian treated me. One evening, I stayed late, saying Miles had a fever, and I had him with a neighbor. Julian didn't care and hurried off. I knew he was going with Allison. The office was left with only Mrs. Porter and me. She said tiredly, "Men, their careers always come first. Don't think too much." She walked to the coffee area, and right at that moment, her computer restarted by itself. But instead of opening a loss report, it popped up a file. Porter Asset, 2024.xlsx. My heart went wild. She was still at the coffee area. I clicked the file. It opened. I went numb. It wasn't a loss report. It was a list of contracts, cash flow, transfers into an account under the name Porter Asset Group, LLC. And I suddenly remembered. Porter was Julian's father's last name. This was the shell company he used to move assets. There was no $75,000 loss, only net profit of more than $3 million. I hurried to look for a USB drive in the drawer. None. Damn it. I heard Mrs. Porter's footsteps coming back. I immediately minimized the file and returned the screen to the loss report. Just in time. She came in with her coffee, sat down, and kept working like nothing happened. She didn't know I had seen it. Or did she pretend? I wasn't sure, but I was sure of one thing. I had seen the treasure. I knew where it was. And I only needed one more chance. Tonight, I would buy a USB drive. Tomorrow, I would act. After that fateful night, I didn't go back to the company again. The next morning, I called Julian using the same weak, trembling voice he was already used to. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm not going to work at the company anymore." Immediately, Julian roared into the phone. "What? Why now? You just started and you're already complaining?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to crack like a woman falling apart. "It's not that. Yesterday, Allison humiliated me. She called me a parasite, an obstacle. I'm so ashamed. I can't take it anymore. I'd rather stay home and take care of our son. Please." I knew Julian would never turn around and ask Allison if it was true. For him, hearing me say ashamed and "I'm stepping back" was more than enough. "Fine, do whatever you want." And he hung up. So I returned to the role of the stay-at-home mother. But my mind was nowhere near the house. I made multiple copies of the USB. One copy I sent to my mother to keep locked in a safe, one copy I hid inside Miles's old stuffed teddy bear, and a third copy I encrypted and stored in an anonymous cloud service. The weapon was ready. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment. And the moment came faster than I expected. Julian started coming home more often, but not to eat dinner with me. He came to take his things, take his best suit, take his expensive cologne. He moved out openly without even pretending anymore. Allison, just as I suspected, was truly pregnant. She stopped coming to the company regularly. Julian told me he had to travel constantly for work, but I knew he was at another apartment taking care of his pregnant mistress. One day, I was feeding Miles applesauce when Julian suddenly walked in. He looked furious, but strangely, he didn't yell. He sat down on the sofa and looked at me the way someone looks at something whose fate has already been decided. "Kendra, I need to talk to you." I flinched, immediately pretending to be confused. "Yes, is something important going on?" He went straight to the point, as if I had failed so completely there was no need to stage another "the company is bankrupt" performance. "I want a divorce." Those 2 words, even though I had prepared for them 1,000 times, still stabbed my chest. This pain was real. "Huh. What did you say?" The spoon of applesauce slipped from my hand. Julian let out a contemptuous laugh, the same cruel laugh I had seen at the office. "You heard me. Divorce. I don't feel anything for you anymore. Living with you is hell." I jumped up, my voice shaking from acting and rage at the same time. "You don't feel anything anymore? Hell? How dare you say that? And what about our son?" "Don't worry." Julian shrugged, ice cold. "Kids? After the divorce, I'll still fulfill my responsibility. But honestly, I have someone else." He admitted it outright. "Who? Is it Allison?" I screamed. Julian smiled coldly. "You already know. Even better. Yes, Allison. She's better than you." Then he paused for exactly 1 beat, like he was aiming straight for my heart, and threw the final line down like a hammer. "She's pregnant with my child." Dear God. Even though I'd guessed it, even though I'd seen the signs, hearing him say it to my face so shamelessly still made my blood boil. You're an animal." I lunged at him, clawing like I'd lost my mind. "How could you do this to us? What did I do wrong? I sacrificed for you. Then you sleep with someone else and you get her pregnant, you bastard." Julian shoved me away easily. I crashed onto the floor. He straightened his shirt, looking at me with disgust. "Done with the drama? That's exactly why I'm sick of you. A sloppy woman who only knows how to scream and cry." He rolled his eyes. "Look at you. Pathetic." He humiliated me inside my own home. "Fine." He spoke like he was reading a sentence. "Let me be clear. First, divorce. Second, this house is mortgaged and will be repossessed. You won't keep anything. Third, my company is truly bankrupt. I'm buried in debt. If you want, I'll split it with you." He was still using the bankruptcy and debt story to scare me. He still thought I was the same idiot as before. I sat on the floor and cried. I cried violently. I cried for 5 years of youth I threw to a dog. I cried for my own stupidity. I don't want anything. I won't sue. I don't want debt. I just want... I looked up, my vision blurred with tears, and I knew the most important performance of my life started right here, the performance that would decide my son's future. I crawled on the floor and grabbed Julian's leg, a humiliating act I never thought I would do, but I had to. I had to be perfect in the role of a woman cornered, completely defeated. "Honey, please, I'm begging you," I sobbed, my face drenched with tears and snot. "You say you have someone else, another child. I accept it." Julian looked down at me, his voice sharp as a blade. "You agree?" I nodded over and over, relieved like a shipwreck survivor who had finally grabbed a life ring. "I agree. I agree to everything. Prepare the papers. I'll sign." "The papers are already prepared." Coldly, he threw a stack of documents onto the table, exactly like the nightmare I used to imagine. The divorce settlement, already signed by him, and every clause sliced like a blade. No joint assets, no joint debt. The minor child Miles remains under the custody of the mother Kendra. The father, Julian, is exempt from paying child support. It was even more ruthless than the original plan. He didn't leave it as temporarily. He wrote the word exempt outright to free himself from every responsibility. "Sign." He tossed a pen toward me. My hand trembled as I held it. Tears kept falling, but this time no one knew what kind of tears they were. His arrogance had just handed me the greatest gift. He had just signed his own sentence. I signed Kendra Wallace. This time, my signature was strong and decisive. Julian snatched the papers, checked my signature, then smiled in satisfaction. "Great. Now pack your stuff and the kid and get out. The bank will come to repossess the house this week. I don't want them finding you here. Too much trouble." He lied without blinking. The mortgage was still being paid on time, and with the company's real money, he could have paid it off entirely. He just wanted me gone as fast as possible. I'll be at family court the day after tomorrow at 9 in the morning. We finish this. Then he turned and left. He didn't even look toward the room where his son was playing. The door slammed. I stayed on the floor. The crying stopped. I slowly got up and wiped my tears. A cold smile appeared at the corner of my mouth. Julian, you finished your part. Now it's my turn to step onto the stage. There are times you think you're losing, but really, you're just waiting for the exact moment to flip the table. People think the one who kneels is the loser. No one knows there are kneels, meant only to hide a smile. Because when the betrayer has finished signing what he believes is his ticket to freedom, that's also the moment he slips his own neck into the noose. I walked into the room and hugged Miles tightly. Miles, baby, we're free now. Come on, mommy's boy, pack up. We're going somewhere much better. Miles looked confused, then smiled. His smile was my sunlight. Yes, I would give my son the best life he had ever known, with my $60 million, and with the collapse of his own father. On the day of court, Los Angeles was pouring rain, as if the rain wanted to wash away the final ruins of my 5-year marriage. I held Miles in my arms, deliberately wearing my oldest outfit, huddled outside the courtroom doors, pathetic enough to match the script Julian wanted to see. Julian and Allison arrived after us. He drove a luxury car I had never seen before, opened the door, and helped Allison out as if she were a queen. Allison wore an elegant maternity dress, sunglasses, arrogance spilling from every step. Her belly was already clearly showing. They walked past me. Julian didn't even look at Miles. He glanced at me and threw out a crude line. Get in. Let's finish this. The uncontested divorce hearing moved with a chilling speed. The judge, a woman who looked exhausted, flipped through the file and asked in a flat voice, Kendra and Julian, have you thought this through carefully? We answered in unison, yes. The judge read the terms again, stamping them onto my fate. The minor child Miles remains under the custody of the mother, Kendra. The father, Julian, is exempt from paying child support. There are no joint assets or joint debts. Is that correct? Hearing the phrase, exempt from paying child support, my heart sank, but I still lowered my head and whispered, trembling, staying in character, yes, that's correct. Julian answered clearly, yes, Your Honor. Allison sat in the row behind us, curling her lips into a smile. That smile felt like thousands of needles stabbing my skin. Keep smiling. Smile now, because you'll cry soon enough. The judge brought down the gavel. Boom! One dry sound ended everything. I walked out holding Miles. Julian and Allison walked ahead, whispering and laughing like a burden had just been lifted. He didn't turn back to say goodbye to his son. Not once. I stood in the rain, hugging Miles tightly. I was free. A 32-year-old woman, betrayed, empty-handed, with a child in my arms. That was the image Julian wanted to see, and that was the image I gave him. But he didn't know. In the pocket of my old coat was a new prepaid phone, and in my mother's bank account, there were $60 million. I didn't go back to that awful rental room. That place was only part of the performance. I carried Miles, ordered a luxury Uber, and went straight to an exclusive suburb, to a high-end condominium overlooking the Pacific in Santa Monica. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, a scruffy-looking woman holding a small child, asking to go to one of the most expensive places in Los Angeles. But I didn't care. I had used my money, my mother's money, to buy a luxury apartment under my mother's name. I paid nearly $1.5 million for it. The door opened like it opened into another world. An apartment about 350 square meters, lavish interior, massive glass windows looking straight out at the ocean. Miles, a child who only knew a small house, lit up. He ran everywhere, laughing as if he were breathing for the first time. I set him down on the warm wooden floor, stepped into the bathroom, and turned the water on full blast. I scrubbed myself like I was trying to wash away every stain of the past year. I cried. This time, They were tears of relief. Under the shower, warm water flowed through my hair, over my skin, like it was washing away the old Kendra, the naive wife, the woman who was trampled. I looked into the mirror. No longer the face with messy hair and swollen eyes. I saw a different woman, stronger, colder, and free. I'm not naive Kendra anymore. I'm the woman who controls my own fate. That night, I ordered the best food without caring about the price. I bought Miles a mountain of new toys. I threw out all the old clothes, like I was throwing away an entire life of being stepped on. I called my mother. "Mom, I'm divorced." My mother's voice exhaled in relief. "Yes, thank God. You're free now, my girl." I stood by the glass window, watching Los Angeles sparkle like 1,000 diamonds. "Mom, now it begins. I'm not going to let them live in peace." The first name on my list was Damon Cross, an ex-partner Julian used to brag that he had pushed out of the company. I hired a private investigator. 3 days later, I had everything. Damon Cross, 42, ruined by Julian, bankrupt, wife left, currently owns a small metal fabrication shop in Inglewood, losing money, drowning in debt. Perfect. A man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous ally. Damon's shop in Inglewood was a rundown warehouse. I walked in, the air thick with oil and rust. A scruffy middle-aged man with grease on his face was bent over fixing a machine. He looked like failure, but his eyes still burned, eyes of a talented man crushed by life. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Mr. Cross." "That's me. Who's asking?" "I'm here about Julian Wallace." The wrench in his hand hit the floor. He shot up, eyes bloodshot. "What did you say? Who are you?" "I'm Kendra, Julian Wallace's ex-wife." Damon laughed bitterly. "Ex-wife? Did he send you to take this shop too?" "You've got it wrong." My voice turned cold. "I'm like you. I just got conned by him too. Thrown out without a cent. He took everything from me." Damon's expression shifted from rage to shock. He saw the hatred in me. Hatred so familiar it was like looking into a mirror. I stepped closer. "I came to ask you one question. Do you hate him? Do you want everything back? Do you want to see him go bankrupt?" In the roar of machinery, 2 of Julian's victims stared at each other. I saw fire flare in Damon's eyes. "Hate?" He ground his teeth. "I want to rip him apart. I want to see him dead." "Excellent," I said simply. "Then, Mr. Cross, partner with me." "Partner?" Damon froze. "You said you have no money. I'm about to shut down." I smiled, opened my bag, and pulled out a folder. "You're half right. You're about to shut down. And me? I have 2 things. First, evidence of tax evasion, asset transfers, and the company's real accounting. Everything Julian has been hiding." Damon's eyes widened. His hands trembled as he clutched the folder. "My God, where did you get this?" "And second," I looked him straight in the eyes, "more important, how much money do you need to destroy his company?" Damon swallowed. "Destroying him isn't a joke. It would take at least $750,000. "Fine," I answered immediately. "I'll give you $750,000. The whole shop felt like it stopped breathing. Are you out of your mind?" I took out my phone and opened a banking app. "Mr. Cross, I don't have time to joke. I have money. Where it came from is none of your business." I pushed a prepared contract toward him. "We form a new company. You choose the name. You're the CEO, 20% equity. I'm the anonymous investor, 80%. I only need one thing. Julian's company must go bankrupt." Damon read it, eyes turning red. "Kendra, you trust me that much?" "I don't trust you," I said bluntly. "I trust your hatred. I'm investing in that hatred. Don't disappoint me." Damon clenched his fist, nodding like he was swearing into fire. "Deal. I'll drag Julian down to hell." "Then choose the company name." He thought for a second. "Blue Forge Industries, reborn from the ashes." I held out my hand. "Nice to meet you, Director Cross." That handshake. was the real signature of an alliance. The game began, and Damon truly was a phoenix. With $750,000, he paid off debt, rebuilt the shop, flew to Japan, convinced partners, and signed an exclusive distribution contract for a new tech product line. Blue Forge was born quietly, but sharp as a blade, driving straight into Julian's weak spot. Every week, Damon sent reports, and I read them like revenge fiction. Week 1, Julian scoffed. That loser Damon still hasn't learned his lesson. Month 1, Blue Forge launched its product. Better quality, more modern design, priced only slightly higher. Customers started paying attention. Month 3, Damon won the first major contract, a key client of Julian's. Julian started snapping. He called, insulted, threatened, useless. The client set it straight. Damon's product is better, the warranty is faster, the service is excellent. Why should I buy from you? Month 5, Damon launched a trade-in program. Customers brought old products, mostly Julian's, to trade for discounts on Blue Forge. It was a killing blow. Distributors turned away in waves. Orders canceled like a waterfall. Julian's company started to wobble. Julian didn't understand. He couldn't understand why Damon, the man he once crushed, suddenly had money to attack like this. And he had no idea. The $750,000 I gave was only the beginning. If needed, I was willing to add $1 million, $2 million. I didn't lack money. I lacked satisfaction. Month 12, Damon's report was only one line. Julian has started borrowing from loan sharks. He's out of liquidity. I read it, and it tasted sweet. Why was he out of money? Because the $3 million he moved was frozen inside Porter Asset Group LLC. Real estate, luxury cars, a home for the mistress. He couldn't pull it out in time. And what about his real company? Years of tax evasion, fake loss reports. What could he use to secure a bank loan? He fell into the exact trap he built. Allison gave birth to a baby boy, but Julian had no mind to celebrate. He smashed things. He cursed Allison as bad luck, said that pregnancy had cursed him. Allison finally snapped, "You promised me everything, and now you're a failure." Their love nest turned into hell. Then it collapsed. Couldn't pay the supplier in China. They cut him off. Couldn't pay payroll. Employees quit. Couldn't pay interest. Loan sharks showed up to wreck the place and seize whatever could still be sold. Wallace Commercial Builds officially declared bankruptcy. The day I heard, I opened a bottle of expensive grape juice and stood on the balcony, looking down at the Los Angeles night. Julian. This was only the appetizer. News of Julian's bankruptcy became a shockwave. People rumored gambling. People rumored he got played by a rival. That rival, Damon's Blue Forge, only Damon and I knew who was really playing the game. Julian vanished. He didn't dare return to the seized company, and he didn't return to the luxury apartment the bank repossessed either. He, Allison, and the newborn ended up in a shabby room in a rundown suburb outside Los Angeles. I thought he would sink and disappear, but I underestimated his audacity. He found me through my father. My father came to Los Angeles, saw his daughter living well without knowing where the money came from, and he was proud. He liked to boast at the barbershop. "My daughter Kendra is doing great. She's a boss, living in a fancy place, driving a nice car. Her ex-husband was blind." Someone there knew a distant relative of Julian's. The news reached him. Kendra, his ex-wife, living in a fancy place, driving a nice car, acting like a boss. Julian went insane. He couldn't believe the woman he had drained dry could become rich that fast. He stalked the barbershop and eventually traced my address, the luxury building. One afternoon, I picked Miles up from preschool. The elevator opened in the lobby, and I froze. Julian was there. No longer polished. He was skinny, beard wild, clothes dirty, eyes bloodshot. He stared at me, then stared behind me, at the luxury. "Kendra, you—" he stammered. I lifted Miles up by instinct, holding him tight against my chest. "What are you doing here? Where did you get the money?" he screamed. "You tricked me. You had money and you hid it." I smiled. Not the smile of a wife, the smile of a winner. "Whether I have money or not, what does it have to do with you?" I said calmly. "Did you forget? We're divorced. You're the one who abandoned us." Julian suddenly seemed to snap into a new plan. He dropped to his knees. "Kendra, please." He crawled toward me, trying to grab my leg. I stepped back, clutching Miles. He cried dramatically, face wet with tears and snot. I was wrong. It was Allison's fault. She seduced me, bewitched me. She's bad luck. I kicked her out. I kicked her and her baby out. My heart was empty. Only disgust remained. And he kept going, pathetic. "Come back to me. For Miles. A son needs a father. You're rich now. Help me. I'm bankrupt, drowning in debt. Give me one chance. I swear I'll love you, love our son. I'll be your slave." He slammed his forehead to the lobby floor. Security started looking over. I stared at the man who used to be my husband, who used to be my son's father, and I knew now was the moment to end it. "Julian," I said, ice cold, "do you remember the day in court? You signed the agreement. You told the judge you would not pay child support. You abandoned your son without a shred of regret." He whispered, "I was blind then. Anything I have today has nothing to do with you." I cut him off. "You want to know where the money came from?" I looked him straight in the eyes and dropped it like a stone. "I won the lottery. I won Powerball, $100 million, on the exact day I came to your office and heard you in bed." Julian jerked his head up. His face changed colors, pale, drained white, then turning purple. He understood everything. He understood what he had thrown away. I, he hissed like a wounded animal. "Yes." I smiled coldly. "You threw away $100 million, and $50 million would have been yours if you hadn't signed papers abandoning me and abandoning Miles with your own hands." I stepped half a step closer, lowering my voice. "Blue Forge Industries, Damon's company, was funded by me. $750,000. Surprised? You are the one who stood behind your own collapse." Julian went berserk and lunged. "You bitch! You set me up! I'll sue! The winnings were during the marriage. You owe me half. Give me my money back." "Security!" I shouted. 2 guards rushed in, grabbed Julian, and dragged him outside. "From now on, this man is banned from the building." As he was pulled away, Julian kept screaming, "You damn bitch! You tricked me! I'll sue you!" I held Miles, calmly stepped into the elevator. I had predicted it. His greed would never die, and I had been waiting for him to sue. 1 week later, the court summons arrived. Julian sued for a share of assets, accusing me of winning the lottery during the marriage and hiding it to trick him into divorcing, keeping everything. He demanded half $50 million. He also deliberately fed rumors to the press, building a story where he was the poor victim of a manipulative woman. People started cursing me. My parents worried. A few friends called. And I only said one sentence. "Don't worry, I didn't do anything wrong." On the hearing day, reporters packed the entrance. Julian arrived by taxi, wearing ragged clothes, crying for the cameras. "I only want justice, and I want to be a father to my son." I stepped out of a luxury car, wearing a clean white suit, and said nothing. Inside the courtroom, Julian's lawyer was aggressive, showed the lottery ticket, matched the claim date with the divorce date, argued it was marital property. The judge struck the gavel. "Does the defendant have anything to say?" I stood up, looked straight at the judge, not at Julian. "Your Honor, yes, I won the lottery, but I hid it because I discovered a shocking truth. The one hiding assets was not me." I pointed straight at Julian. "It was him." The courtroom buzzed. "Evidence?" the judge asked. "Yes." The USB was connected. The big screen lit up. All the real accounting, contracts, income, expenses, cash flow, routed into Porter Asset Group, LLC. I spoke clearly. While Mr. Julian told me the company was bankrupt and owed $75,000, the truth is, the net profit was more than $3 million. That money was transferred into Porter Asset Group, a family company under his father's name. Is that hiding assets before divorce, Your Honor? Julian's lawyer shouted, "Objection! This evidence was obtained illegally." I smiled. Illegally? Or the head of his accounting department, a person with a conscience, provided it to me? I said that to protect Mrs. Porter. Julian's face went white. I wasn't done. I opened an audio file. Julian and Allison's voices filled the courtroom, perfectly clear. That country bumpkin with the $75,000 debt will leave with nothing. The gallery gasped. Julian collapsed into his chair. I played the third clip. Worst of all, "Let the kid stay with his mom for now. Later, if I want him, I'll take him back." The room went dead silent. The judge frowned and kept writing. Julian jumped up. "No, I didn't mean that." My lawyer stayed calm. "That is your voice recorded in your office." And then I delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, the evidence of years of tax evasion has already been submitted to the IRS and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." Julian screamed, "What?" At that exact moment, the courtroom doors opened. 2 agents from the Financial Crimes Unit walked in. "We are requesting Mr. Julian Wallace come with us regarding allegations of organized tax fraud." Handcuffs clicked on, right in front of the cameras, the crowd, and me. Julian didn't scream anymore. He looked at me with hatred and despair, the look of a man who understood the game was over. I turned my back and walked out. In this match, I won. After the hearing, Julian was no longer the businessman betrayed by his wife. He became a tax fraud, a document forger, a man who deceived his wife and child. His image in handcuffs spread everywhere. He was sentenced to a long prison term. 1 year later, I visited him, first and last time, not to forgive, to close the chapter. "Hello, Julian." He stared at me through the glass, eyes hollow. "You here to laugh at me?" "No." I shook my head. "I came to tell you why you lost. You didn't lose because of me. You lost because of your own greed and cruelty." I lowered my voice, slow and deliberate. "And Phoenix, the thing that destroyed you, was created by me. I'm the one who gave Damon $750,000. I'm the owner." Julian's phone slipped from his hand, not from shock, but because something inside him had just died. I turned and left. Stepping out of the prison gates, the sun was blazing. I took a deep breath. Freedom. Today, Miles is 8 years old, smart, joyful, and safe. Blue Forge Industries, under Damon's leadership, became a successful corporation, and I became a respected investor. I never remarried. I have Miles, my parents, and a life I built with my own hands. I founded a charity to help single mothers and victims of emotional abuse, people who used to be like me. One weekend afternoon, I took Miles to fly a kite in the park. He ran across the grass, laughing in the wind. My parents sat on a bench, watching, peaceful. Miles ran back and asked innocently, "Mommy, why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" I knelt down to his level, gentle. "You do have a dad, sweetheart, but he's far away. He made bad choices. But you have Mommy, Grandma, Grandpa, and we love you so much." Miles wrapped his arms around my neck. "I love Mommy the most." I hugged him tight, my tears rising. But this time, they were tears of happiness. And if you're listening to this story, if you're being made to believe you're small, remember, you're not small. People just want you to believe that. Strength isn't not being afraid. Strength is being afraid and still moving forward. And sometimes the greatest gift in a person's life isn't what you gain, it's what you escape. Phoenix isn't just the name of a company. Phoenix is the symbol of a woman who was burned by betrayal, but still rose from the ashes and shone brighter than ever,